All right, we're going to get started here. Her name's already up there, so I guess I don't have to introduce her. But this is Amanda Costello from College of Education Human Design. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Hi. Thanks so much for having me here today. I really loved Phoebe's talk earlier. She started talking about architecture and things, and I thought, oh man, it's my talk. But this really dovetails well with the stuff that she was talking about earlier. So hi, my name's Amanda. I look like this, in case you can't see me. If you're on Twitter, where I am sometimes, and you'd like to talk to me there, that's my Twitter name, my Twitter account. I'm an IT interloper. So I am actually in the communications family, and sometimes don't hear about IT things, which is another kind of level of separation that happens at the university. So while I do interact with the internet and computers like this, I also interact with faculty content like this. If you've not seen the series of GIFs of this monkey interacting with objects, it's wonderful. So this is what I do in short. I'm a content strategist. So I say that I make sure that the content on our site is useful for the people who need it. Other folks who do user experience or do information architecture will sometimes be like, well, that's not quite it and what you do. But this is the kind of thing when I have, say, one of our deans see me in the hallway and they're like, you, employee, hey, what do you do for job? And I say, I internet for job. I do this. And they might either say, great, I'm glad someone's doing that, goodbye forever, or tell me more about this, and then I can. I've been at the University of Minnesota for 10 years. I'm also an alum. I'm making good use of my English degree by doing content strategy, and I really love working here. I love the mission of the university, the content that I get to represent, helping people live better lives, like all the stuff that we get to put out. I really love it. So most days, the university's motto, driven to discover, is how we're feeling, at work. But some days it's not great. We're not so much driven to discover as we are driven to just go. Real graffiti by Dinkytown. We were coming back from lunch and my coworker was like, wait. Now, I said I'm on Twitter a lot. This was something that was tweeted a couple years ago from President Kaler. He was encouraging the incoming freshmen, say, always cheer for the Gophers and avoid those other rodents like wolverines and badgers. Go Gophers! I got on Twitter, pushed on my glasses, and says, actually, they're mustelites. Don't cheer for much, because rodents are wolverines. They're like more like otters or weasels. So that happened. He didn't respond. I didn't get fired. Skyuma. But I'm able to have this conversation with the president of the university on Twitter. And some people could say maybe he didn't see it, but I bet he saw it. It was just like, oh man, Amanda's really got my back. Whew. Thank goodness. We can just let it ride. But I can have at least a one-way conversation with the president of our organization, which is pretty amazing because we have thousands and thousands of employees. So there are ways to kind of bridge those gaps in between things. This is also amazing because we have silos, a lot of them. This is not actually our org map. I think this is like Department of Health or something. This is from the federal government, but we do a good job at keeping up with them, with how many silos that we have. Really, I tried to figure out, a lot of people say break down silos. Let's break them down, let's burn them down. I'm like, cool, great, yes. How do you do that? And like a good millennial, I went to Google, and I Googled it, and I found some Business Archive articles, there's stuff from Forbes, this is what we should do, but no one really had a good answer or something to work towards. So then I realized that our silos are much more like this. It's not that it's just silos next to each other. They're silos inside of silos, inside another silo. It's this big nested Matryoshka doll of silos. Someone on the internet also had a take on silos. They didn't like them, and they said, silos belong on farms. I took issue with this because No, like, bro, do you even Midwest? Because this is what I'm thinking about when I think about silos. These are the real silos that make sense for a metaphor between an organizational silo and an actual silo, these grain silos. Short history lesson, Minneapolis, also nicknamed the Mill City because I think we were one of the top flour producing milling cities in the world. Like 12% of the world's flour at the turn of the century came from Minneapolis. We milled like 4 million bags of flour every day. It was a huge part of our industry. And as such, there are a ton of grain silos and flour mills and remnants of that past all over the place. Because things changed. Agriculture changed and food production changed. Transportation changed. So we have things left over from that. This is part of the United Crushers silos, and which is also part of the ADM complex, which this part just has, I think, 80 silos in it, and the larger complex has like 130 silos in it, all of which are abandoned. It's not being used. They used to be a huge part of how we shipped out grain, and now they're not. So I see silos all over. This isn't the only silo complex, even in Minneapolis. I'm sure you can all think of a bunch of silos, either in use or not, that you pass all the time. And I see these when I was driving to campus, because helpfully these silos are like a block away from our metaphorical silos, which is, I'm sure, exactly why they built the stadium there. So I started to look at this connection, the silos that we deal with internally, these external silos that I'd see on my way into work. And I connected it up with this book. Has anyone read this book? Yes, awesome, cool. We'll get pizza later. For those who haven't, this is my idea of really awesome weekend reading, because I'm also kind of an architecture nerd. I like historical architecture and the idea of how people use space. So Stuart Brand wrote this book, How Buildings Learn, about sustainable architecture and about how a building will change and develop as other things around it change and develop. While I was reading it, there was a quote that popped out to me, that a building's responsibility is not only to remain sturdy with age, but to remain appropriate to its users as they themselves evolve. And that's where my little imagine, like, oh, this is like this kind of thing started to come in. And I started to see my own work with the web, with tech, with content strategy tie into my other thing that I love of architecture. These are some silos that are also being used differently. These are silos on the Minneapolis bank of the Mississippi downtown during Northern Spark, which is an all-night art festival. These silos are now being used as a projection canvas. And there's projection art, people lay on the ground, and then an image is projected up. But it's a big space where that can happen. Cedar Falls has this silo. If you ever wanted to go ice climbing, and you happen to be around Cedar Falls, you might be short of options. However, some out-of-use silos have had water lines run up them, and now people can ice climb. A little closer to home, this is a series of condos that is on the north shore of Lake Calhoun. You may have walked or jogged or biked past them. And once it was pointed out to me, I was able to see that these are indeed a converted grain elevator with silos in the middle. They're very nice, very round-walled condos in the middle. I usually tell folks that, you know, they're about $350,000 to $400,000, to which Minnesotans and Midwesterners go, ooh, spendy. And then everyone else is just like, everyone that's living in the Bay Area or Seattle is like, that's a bargain, let's move to Minnesota. They say, yeah, it's April here. It's a beautiful place to live. Do not bring your crazy housing prices here. So with this whole metaphor working of silos and organizational silos, we have to step back to a little bit of sociology. Humans form groups. We group up. That's what we do. It's evolutionarily part of how we move forward. And we find people who have things in common with us, and we group up with them because we have something in common. The example I'm going to use today is that I am a knitter, and I find other knitters, and we talk about knitting. I do not crochet. I'm sure I know some folks who crochet, but I'm not a crocheter. What will we talk about? They're so different. So I grew up with my knitters, and that's great. It also gives me protection from crap. Say that there was some kind of issue where, I don't know, all crochet hooks were outlawed. And I was like, great. I don't use a crochet hook. I use knitting needles. We're fine. Something bad happens to the crocheters, like, sucks that it happened to you, but that was another group. However, then this leads to this us versus them thing of like, no, I'm a knitter. They're a crocheter. That's a different group. That's not them. We wind up then being unwilling to share. We all still use fiber and yarn, and it's pretty similar. No, this is mine. This is not yours. There's only so much to go around. And then efficiency gets wrecked. We could probably do more if we worked well together, but we don't want to, so things wind up happening in secret. You may be familiar with the famous quote, "I sure hope all of my hard work is being secretly duplicated elsewhere," said no one ever. Then this reduces morale. Someone also pointed out that this picture is used as an example of what happens when you divide by 0, which, yeah. Because, who wants to be working really hard on something and look around and then realize that someone else has already done the thing, but your hard work was still really great, and then you just feel bummed out, and that's no good. Let's add to this happy mix higher ed. Higher ed comes into this world of silos in a really strange way because we're a very, very old institution. This is an old map of part of Oxford University, but Oxford University has been around for almost 1,000 years. The universities in Fez in Morocco are even older. And then you've got Harvard, which was founded like 100 years before America was a thing. So it's not just that we're working in a big system. We're working in a big system with this institutional memory that churns and churns and churns. A friend of mine, Devin Asaro, said that organizational silos in higher ed aren't just a bureaucratic necessity, but they're this closely guarded way of life. And it's been going on that way for a long time. It's also a weird industry, and I call it the idea factory. We are here, we're a mission-driven organization, but we're different than a lot of other ones. Our mission, crassly, is to think and then do things with that thinking, connect that thinking to other thinking, teach that thinking to other folks who will think about new things, and then do a thing with that thinking, iterate on that thing. So we come up with these ideas and then build on other ideas. And this has to happen in a larger setting, and it's best happening in a setting where many people can have ideas together, because the myth of the lone genius is just that. It's a myth. No one sits down in a room by themselves and has a whole idea just spring forth. And you will hear the story told again and again that there's this one person who just comes up with all these great things, and where would we be without them? It's a myth. So higher ed is weird. I called up HR and then got bounced around, and I said, how many people at the university are faculty? Oh, quick pause. Anyone here faculty? Okay, safe. Sorry, WebEx, you might do that. I had someone once, one person raise their hand. I'm like, how good of a sense of humor do you have about that? And it was pretty good. So I said, how many people do we have here that are faculty? They gave me a number. I'm like, well, how about factor in grad students doing research and postdocs? And they're like, I'm like, and, a ton of staff. We are also a part of this. This culture of ideation and everything brings us together and gets us thinking about stuff in ways that folks in other industries sometimes don't. And it's maybe 20 to 40%. These are soft numbers. We can't say how many people are really kind of ideating for work here, but it's a way higher percentage than other places. So then what motivates people in higher ed? Again, I've been here for about 10 years, and I've been looking at this kind of thing that moves people forward. I work on a lot of projects, and these are the things I found. The big motivator, resource scarcity. There's just not enough for everyone's great idea. Say there are 5 amazing, world-changing, life-saving ideas that we've got, but we only have the resources for 3. It doesn't mean that the other ones are bad. We just don't have infinite resources. We don't have enough space for things. We don't have enough time for things. We don't have enough people for things. Not enough money. Someone once said, hey, but don't you have all that money in athletics that comes in through your foot? I'm like, sure, no. Stop. No. And then this leads to jealousy, because your idea was super good, but someone else got the resources for it. It moves on with this because your things weren't bad. They just didn't get a thing, or they didn't get all of it. You wanted $500. You got $100. You wanted 5 new FTEs for this. You got a 0.5 FTE for this. And this jealousy moves on, and it goes beyond just they have something that I want, and it moves to they have something I deserve. You may be familiar with this, Sayre's Law, that higher ed, the politics are so vicious because the stakes are so low. Yeah, you know that you've been in a fight like this, where people should really be arguing about some kind of larger scope of something, but someone else is mad because the names aren't listed in alphabetical order, and their project really needs to be on the homepage. Of course, I'm not talking about any specific person I've worked with. Of course not. I'm actually not, because our homepage works different. Anyway, so we get our silos, and our silos are dipped in crazy sauce. And any of the information I was able to find about tearing down organizational silos, it just wasn't working. I kept being like, no, but we're different. But we're different. We're different. This just won't work. We're too different. So this is like the feel-good portion of the talk. I'm sure you all have a big upper. Feeling great about everything. This is the good send you off back to your offices. But good news, everyone. We have a solution, and it's because of where we work, in the ivory tower. How's that for a silo, right? So we're here in the ivory tower, and I actually think that this is the exact perfect place for us to do something about organizational silos because of our unique space, because we move we definitely move a lot slower than other industries. Nick Rosenkrantz, who was referenced earlier in the talk, has a joke about if there's ever like a zombie outbreak, that the closest, safest place to go would be a higher ed campus because the changes won't get there for another 2 years. But the upside of this is that we can move a little slower. We're not always driven by next quarter, next week, that kind of stuff. I've told people in the private sector, it took us a year to launch a website. And they're like, what is wrong with you? I tell people in higher ed that, they're like, how did you go so quickly? We move at a different pace, so we can use that to our advantage. Because we're just like these buildings, that our job is to remain sturdy with age. Our industry has been around for a long time, but also to remain appropriate to our users, our students, our faculty, our staff members, members of the community and the state. We have to remain appropriate to them because they are always changing. So Brand talks about looking at a building not as one thing, but as many things, and seeing the components of the building to grow and change. A building has a site, the place where it's sitting on, then the structure of the building. The outside is the skin or items that are on the exterior. Then you move inside and you get the services, what the building is meant to do inside. Then the space plan, how it's laid out, and finally the stuff. Each one of these things in a building can be changed, and they can be changed at different rates. So stuff, you can change the stuff in a building in days. The space plan, move your desks around, different things like that. Services, when it gets to the function of the building, if you wanted to change a car garage into a classroom, that's going to take a little more work. The skin, things on the outside, and then the structure can take a lot longer to change. But when you're thinking about changing something, you can see it as components, not just change a building. Similarly with these condos. They had to change to be condos because if you owned one of these condos and were in the kitchen and you had to go up to the roof and back down to go to your bathroom, that would be bad and dumb and terrible, and you wouldn't live there for very long because that's not how people use residences. They don't. So with this, think about working horizontally. We have all of these silos. They're all around us. Reach out to other folks who are like you. Honestly, being in this room right now with all these groups coming together for TechPeople is a great way to start this. There are other folks in this room who are dealing with stuff that you're dealing with. So you can start to work across these silos. Ask who else. Who else might have this problem? Or who else is doing this well? If I see someone whose website looks good, or even just looks like it didn't get dressed in the dark, then I will drop them a note and say, hey, this looks fantastic. Can you tell me about this? And very rarely does someone ever say, no, who are you? What's going on? So also remember these motivators: resource scarcity and jealousy. Let's talk about Wisconsin. Anyone here from Wisconsin? This is probably going to fit. Do you have a good sense of humor about that? The University of Wisconsin, I have some colleagues that work down there, and they had heard about our model of how we do content strategy. And they wanted that at Madison very badly. So they said, hey, can you come down here and talk with us about stuff? We'll bring everyone together, talk about how you do your knowledge sharing, talk about how this model works, how you do web stuff, so we can have that conversation too. And I said, of course I will. So I went down there. We had this big conversation. It was wonderful. Their student union is right on the lake. It has New Glarus. It was a very, very tough moment for me, but I had a wonderful time. A woman came up to me after we were done and said, I can't believe that Minnesota let you come here. One, it's not like it's a closed border, like the state didn't prevent me. Neither did the university. And I mean, she wouldn't be wrong for thinking that. I mean, this tweet here, there's a rivalry between our schools. Of course there is. But me sharing best practices with Madison, that's just all of us doing better. It's not our football coaches saying these are the plays we're going to run. It's not our admissions office saying these are our recruitment tactics. We have a ton of things in common. And if all of our websites are better, that's fantastic. If I know something that can help them out, that's really good. See, look how friendly they are. Do you know how hard it was to find this picture? Every other picture was like Goldie like body slamming Bucky, or Bucky like kicking Goldie in the face. I'm like, thanks. So build strong bridges when you find these connections. And if you build a bridge for other people, maybe I know that Michael and David, you've got stuff that you should talk about. I can connect you, and then I can leave. If you build a bridge, you can feel free to make it strong and go away. Build the bridge and do not be the troll underneath it. You can also work vertically inside these silos that we've got. Here's a story with Art. Here's my boss. And here's his boss, the chief of staff. They work in one silo. They were going to go to a meeting with a chief of staff in another college to talk about our content strategy model. The chief of staff, they have half. Okay. Now, when he's talking to these chiefs of staff, our chief of staff said to my boss, hey, I want to know about this model. This other college is interested in it. Would you come to this meeting? And he said, sure. But then he realized that if he was going to explain directly to the other chief of staff about the model, about what we do and how we work, it wouldn't make a ton of sense. They're kind of speaking different languages. They're dealing with different things. So he met with our chief of staff and answered his questions. And then when they met together, they could talk chief of staff language and have the same kind of scope and ideas, be able to pass on information. Similarly, him meeting with the chief of staff made it so that if he's not in that meeting, if he's not in the room, that our chief of staff can still talk about and make a good case for how we work on the web and how we collaborate with each other. These meetings are very helpful. I recommend having them with your boss, or even better yet, your grand boss, your boss's boss. Meet with them and start to ask them what questions they've got about what you do. And let them ask any question that they want. It might be silly. It might be a little weird. I had one of our former administrators come up to me once, saw me in the hallway, and was like, remembered that I internet for job. And she said, Amanda, what is our strategy in the college for Tinder? And I said, we do not have one. And she was like, oh, interesting. Like, what do you think Tinder is? And she said, I don't know. I saw it on the news. All the kids doing the Tinder. I said, yes, but it's a dating app. And she's like, okay, all right. The college does not need a Tinder strategy. But she didn't know. She heard it was some internet thing that the kids are doing, so should we be there? No, we don't need to be on Tinder. The university does not need a Tinder presence. Not part of how we do it. But she felt she could come up and ask me, and I was able to tell her, and she's like, great, until she stood up and, she prevented her from standing up in a council of deans meetings or something and going, hi, I've got a question about how we're using Tinder. No, that never happened because we had the conversation beforehand. So let them ask questions. Let them ask something that they may be confused about. It will help get your good work to other rooms that you might not be in. This is good motivation because it's built on trust and respect. Bad motivation is by fear. You can get a scared person to do something. You can motivate a scared person. It is not sustainable and it is super gross. Do not do this. I brought a terrible example. This is a video that makes me mad every time I see it. And this video is called The Social Media Revolution. And it is the kind of video that leadership shows at conferences to kick things off and say, we're going to talk about the web now. I just want to show this video so that everyone can see what we're dealing with. And then they fire this video up and show it to a giant room of folks that usually don't work with the web or tech at all. I will show you some of it. I also have commentary because it makes me crazy. Yeah, let's get people hyped and listening. That's not how world populations work. That's not where people live. Okay, we come to the march. No, all of this is bad. This makes me crazy. Where are these stats coming from? The Ivy League is joining LinkedIn. Let's get on LinkedIn and get the Ivy League. This is the video that someone sees and they show up and lose their minds at. This video motivates by fear. This is enough to get people to go, hey, everyone's spending money on videos, so you get weird videos that are made for no reason because someone's scared. Speaking of fear, Beloit College. Is anyone familiar with the Beloit Mindset List? It gets sent around every fall. It is meant to be a way so that folks who are in higher ed can understand the mindset of their incoming freshman class. Now, this is really useful in the way that if you were teaching a history class and you were talking about aftermath or effects following the terrorist attacks on 9/11, you could not say to freshmen, so we all remember where we were because the freshmen were probably in early elementary school or preschool. They're just younger. So that's not a good teaching method. You can't rely on that kind of personal connection to the event anymore. That would be useful. Unfortunately, the Beloit Mindset List is written in a way that always comes off as very condescending and weird. Some things from the Beloit Mindset List of a couple years ago. The class of 2019 has never licked a stamp. The class of 2019 assume Wi-Fi is an entitlement. The class of 2019 has no firsthand experience with the charismatic celebrity of Princess Diana. Now, Teddy Roosevelt died in 1919, but I didn't need to be alive to know that this dude was like a weaponized badass. Have you read about this guy? It's crazy. We watched a documentary on him, and I just kept pausing it and going, no, no! Like, he ate a ton of eggs and just exercised his way out of asthma. Like, who are you? But, I mean, people haven't licked the stamp because we invented self-adhesive stamps. Who liked that? Who was like, oh no, I'm missing the part of my childhood where I lick all the stamps. It sucked. Also, the older people invented the self-adhesive stamps. You didn't have a bunch of one-year-olds just going, this stamp thing, I'm out. No, here's my stuff. We don't have that. We made that for them. So this kind of thing where people stop, the example in there of, oh, here come the people under 30, here come the millennials. A lot of times people use millennials to refer to a certain mindset and a certain generation. However, make sure if you're talking about millennials, you're not just actually saying kids these days and being crabby at young people. So with this kind of stuff, give context. You can do the work. You can be better. You can help people understand what it is that you do and how it impacts and affects them. The other good news is that you are not literally trapped in a metal death tube. The silo, the organizational silos, it's a metaphor because you're not actually in a silo. Grade suffocation is terrifying, by the way. When I was running this talk past a colleague, I asked, he grew up on a farm. Again, shout out for Nick Rosencrantz. And I said, I'm talking about silos, making this connection. What should I know? And he said, you know, sometimes they're really good. They're protection from crap. In a big place with a whole bunch of silos, if one of them falls down, you might still be okay because things were siloed. Also, vomitoxin. Vomitoxin, it can infect grain or silage that's being stored. The USDA has a limit. It's 1 part per million of vomitoxin in grain. If there is more than that, all the grain can't be sold, has to be destroyed. So the same way, that's why you would then separate things in multiple silos. If there is 1 part that is infected, that is toxic, that is bad, you don't lose everything at once. Organizational silos, I think, show up in a group that's larger than like 12. So people who are saying, burn it down, make it flat, it just won't happen. But our silos are more porous than we think because, again, not a literal metal death tube. We can talk to each other. We can move out of places. So if you look around and realize sometimes that toxicity, my friend Eileen once said very wisely, some teams are just broken. So if you look around and you realize that you might be in that tumbling silo, you can get out. Change can happen. We can use these silos as this structure. We can make them porous and connect to each other. We don't need to burn it all down and do it flat because honestly, most of us are not in the position to do that. Plus, we're fighting a giant institution and a giant legacy, a history of this industry that's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But you can make change. You can make things different. You can make things better by yourself and with folks in this room. This kind of thing. If you look around in your silo, if you look around in your office, in your group, where you're working, you'll see things that are at the stuff level that you could make that change to make your silo, your organization, your place, your group more responsive to our users as they're evolving. Some things you might realize the change you want to make is a structural change, and it will take a long time. But change can happen at different times and at different levels. People say that it's often hard to get the university to change, which is true because we're huge. Someone once said it was like trying to turn an aircraft carrier. But I think that if you want to go with that one, it's more like a fleet of ships. An aircraft carrier is a huge, amazing piece of engineering that is hard to turn, but it can. And if the fleet around it is turning, the aircraft carrier can come too. There's a really wonderful video online that I'm not going to show the whole thing of because it's wonderful but long. Zay Frank did an online series called The Show in 2006. He ran it for a year and put it to bed. A couple of years later, he decided to restart it and make a new thing. So he made a video called Invocation for Beginnings about starting a new thing. And a couple of quotes of that jumped out to me. One of them is about starting, that my pencils are sharp enough, even the dull ones will make a mark. It can be tempting to just prepare and think about starting and do we have everything in order? Just go for it. And also, the journey of getting something done is wonderful too. because life isn't just a sequence of waiting for things to be done, especially that the work that we do, where the web and tech is always changing and always evolving. A friend once gave me the advice when I became a homeowner of get comfortable with entropy of being a homeowner. And I realized that also relates to my work. It's not something you finish like a book and put on a shelf. It's something that keeps going for a long time. So you can start small. You can pick something little. And I encourage you to start small, but remember to start. Thank you. And I think I'm a little over time. So
Perfect. We're just going to switch to lightning talks, I think.
awesome. We're going to switch to lightning talks, but I'll be around at pizza if you want to talk. There's my email, my Twitter. Also, I can drink lattes forever. So if you want to have a coffee, just drop me a note, and we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So we're going to switch to lightning talks. We had a few people ask